What's up, everybody, and welcome to March Madness. Welcome to potentially the best week of the entire year as we get our brackets for March Madness and as we start filling out those brackets and getting ready for the first four on Monday or Tuesday, Wednesday, sorry, and the first round of 64, Thursday, Friday, and round of 32, of course, Saturday, Sunday. So I'm going to walk through my bracket. I have filled this out a couple times. I'm not a huge believer in filling out a boatload of them. An ESPN analyst said that they fill out three of them. One of them with a bunch of upset picks. One of them that takes he has like a minute to do it, so it's fast, and another one is analytical. And I feel like my fast one and analytical would be relatively the same thing because my thought process doesn't change a whole lot. So, a few things. I don't have non-conference schedules in front of me, so I don't have a lot of strength of schedule type things to go over. I watch a lot of Big 12 basketball because I am a Kansas Jayhawks fan. I've watched my fair share of SEC because they are very popular on Saturdays during basketball season. I don't usually watch a ton of basketball early on in the season because I'm a huge college football fan, so college basketball doesn't really become a thing to me until late January. So if you have arguments against this, I mean, in 3 weeks, this bracket's going to be an absolute disaster. So it really doesn't matter much to me. These are, of course, just my thoughts. Just going to matter in 3 weeks. So let's get to it. Again, the SEC, I believe, is 14 teams in this. So I do have a lot of SEC in my brain of more so curiosity of how the SEC performs based on their crazy schedule that they just played for the last 3 months. Like I said, Big 12 bias guy with Kansas and all these teams I get to watch play Kansas. Obviously, a major down year this year with Kansas. They still made the tournament, but I would not be surprised if they were an early exit on Thursday or Saturday. So, that is a whole lot of just conference stuff. I know, again, the ACC very much down this year. I know Duke could certainly make a run. You got Louisville and Clemson that could maybe push a little bit. Um, my my dad, who is big in sports point spreads and gambling in March Madness and just any sport on any given day of the year. Him and his buddies years ago, I was listening to them, and one of their biggest rules in betting on March Madness is fade the Big Ten. And the more I've gambled and put money on point spreads in March the past couple of years, the more I realize why fading the Big Ten can make you a lot of money. So, if I seem to have something against the Big Ten, it's simply because the Big Ten doesn't usually do very well in March. I don't know why that is. Maybe somebody has analytics and statistics the last decades to back that up, but just know that I was taught years ago to fade the Big Ten point spreads. And in the bracket, I know they have had some success here and there. Michigan and Michigan State finding their way to the Final Four in years past. I know I'm certainly probably forgetting many. Well, obviously Purdue making it to the national title game, long part on Edie being a big part of that, of course. But that is just some conference stuff. I don't have a whole lot of information on mid majors other than the big ones that have already been talked about since the bracket was released on Sunday. I am in North Dakota, so I know a little bit about the Summit League. I know the Summit League doesn't play defense, so I know although Omaha kind of made their way through the Summit League and won the Summit and made the dance, of course, with their automatic bid. I have heard plenty of things that Omaha is not going to be able to hang with, I believe, St. John's. So, here we go. Let's fill out a bracket. Again, you might disagree with most of this, but like I said, in 3 weeks, this is going to and the more I try to do it quickly because the less thought I put into it, usually the more successful it is. So we're going to start with Auburn. I'll take Auburn in the first round. Louisville Creighton, of course, 8-9 games bring with it a lot of interesting things. I think ESPN had a statistic that the 9 seed is actually has a much better record in the last 10 years in the tournament. I do think Louisville should have been a higher seed than an 8. I know their coach, who I'm a big fan of, Pat Kelsey, came out with a bunch of statistics after they were landed an 8 seed, because not only is an 8-9 matchup tough, but if they win, they're likely going to have to face Auburn in the second round, which a team that is was in a struggling ACC. Louisville, of course, has had a few down years the past couple years, and they're kind of coming out of the woodworks now. And obviously, Louisville has always been a very strong basketball program. I am going to take Louisville, even though Creighton and obviously their big man down low, and Cockbrenner, he could pose a lot of problems in Louisville, but I think Louisville takes care of it. But UC San Diego is a team that is being talked about a lot. I have watched them for about 10 total minutes in their conference championship game with UC Irvine, who is another team that possibly could have made an argument for getting an at-large in this tournament. But I see UC San Diego coming into this thing hot. I also know it's obviously their first year of eligibility, which I think is kind of cool. The only downside of that is they don't really have experience in playing in games like this. So that could hurt them a little bit, but Michigan's also not been very consistent. And I'm also going to play my Fade the Big Ten card. So with that, I'll take UC San Diego to go to the next round. In the 13-4 matchup, I'm going to take Yale. I know Yale has some experience in the tournament. Texas A&M, I know Buzz. Can win any game he wants. And the SEC, I know they took down Auburn just a few weeks ago. Auburn's, maybe you could say, struggling just a little bit lately. But I'm going to take Yale to take out Texas A&M, and we already have a 12-13 matchup in the round of 32. Moving on, Ole Miss facing either San Diego State or North Carolina. I mean, we could talk up and down about why North Carolina should not be in this tournament, and I completely agree that there's a few other teams that got snubbed for North Carolina to make their way in. Maybe it's the name on their jersey, who knows? But anyways, I'm going to take Chris Beard, the former Texas Tech coach, former Texas Longhorns coach. And he finds a way to get it done to move on. Here comes my Big 12 bias. I know I've heard a lot of good things about Lipscomb, but I think Iowa State's just going to be too much. The only thing I worry about with Iowa State in the near future is the big injury. I'm sorry I don't have names in front of me of all the players, but I know Iowa State's got some injury problems. I would have loved to put them in my near future national champion here in a second in the title game, but I just don't. With their injuries they're currently dealing with, I don't see Iowa State being able to make it too far in this tournament, unfortunately. The more I see on this 7-10 Marquette, New Mexico, we got Shaka Smart and we got the younger Patino. So this, I know they've talked about the two guards in this game are going to put on an absolute show. I'm going to take Marquette just because they probably have a little more talent than New Mexico. So Marquette takes down New Mexico. And I mean, we got January, February, and Izzo. You can't take. I know Michigan State. I of course say that because every college basketball fan knows about the month of Izzo, which is ironic because Michigan State has had some early eggs. Time, and it is great to see the Florida Gators back being Florida Gator basketball. Anybody who is old enough to remember the Billy Donovan years, the back-to-back national championships with Joakim Noah and Corey Brewer, and plenty of other studs, Al Horford on that team. Florida is absolutely balanced. They walked through the SEC tournament and just embarrassed some teams along the way. I'm curious to see, again, that SEC powerhouse this year, how the overall SEC continues to perform and compete against all the other conferences in this tournament. I don't think Oklahoma's any good. I know, again, they played in the SEC, so maybe their record just isn't showing how truly good they are. But every time I've watched Oklahoma this year, it has not been pretty. And of course, you have Dan Hurley, the most hated current coach in college basketball, not going to bet against UConn against a team like Oklahoma that just kind of inched their way into the tournament and stayed on the bubble just long enough to get in. My next one, again, this is a prime example of me not watching enough mid-major basketball. I've watched Memphis a few times, the Penny Hardaway greats, but I also have heard so much about Colorado State. I know they were a bubble team until they got their automatic bid into the tournament, and big on point spreads, and I'll take a look at point spreads here as we go. But when I look at this game, I went to a sports book and was caught off guard that Colorado State was favored in this game. But Memphis coming from a not very great American conference this year. I'm just going to go ahead and take Colorado State and trust some analytics and trust some experts I've heard the past couple days. Moving on, Grand Canyon making another appearance, but Maryland. Here's my tricky fade, the Big Ten. I'm going to go with Maryland. Maryland's kind of bursting onto the scene in the basketball world, not known to be a terrific team lately. I know Maryland has some historical success, but I'm going to take them to take care of Grand Canyon. Here comes another upset. I'm used to seeing my Kansas Jayhawks absolutely obliterate Missouri, and I did not watch anything but the last 15 seconds against Kansas, Missouri, and Missouri took them down at home, and I know that was a huge deal because of geographical reasons, of course, but the Drake Bulldogs have been here, done that. They're going to take care of the Missouri Tigers, and another SEC team falls early. Here again comes my Big 12 bias. Love Texas Tech in the spot. I think Toppin is going to show out. I hope he doesn't have to do too much. I hope he gets plenty of help from the rest of his team. They have a lot of talent on that Texas Tech team. I know some people, this is kind of a tough draw in the bracket as a 3 seed, but I know some people have had Texas Tech in their Final Fours the last couple weeks, so I know Texas Tech is loaded. And then we come to my Kansas Jayhawks. It has been tough watching the Kansas Jayhawks play this year. Anybody who knows me, it's tough to watch Kansas play basketball this year, if you want to call it that. I laughed at Hunter Dickinson is still receiving accolades because I don't think he's very good. He's 7 foot, and that's about all he has going for him. I hope he flips the switch in the month of March and shows scouts and shows everybody else what he's truly made of, because I don't think a lot of Kansas fans have been overly impressed by the work of Hunter Dickinson lately. I am going to take them to beat Arkansas. I believe they are a 4-point favorite. Let's check out some point spreads here. They are at 4.5. It's already gone down to 4. I don't see them covering that, but I think and their free throws in the down the stretch also scare me. But I'm gonna take my guy Dewan to pull this off, for Zeke to show up and them to just find a way to get it done against an Arkansas team that's a lot like Kansas. They're very inconsistent. You kind of have to guess which team is going to show up, but I'm going to take Kansas to stay out of an early exit. And then again, we come down to the Rick Pitino, the St. John's, the love of the country at the moment with Pitino. I wouldn't say bursting back on the scene, because let's be real, everywhere he goes, he turns programs around. It's great to see St. John's be extremely relevant. And as I've talked about with Omaha, come from the Summit League, that's not been fantastic the last couple of years. The icky part about the Summit is the last couple of years, a lot of their first and second team all conference players disperse and go elsewhere, and they hit the portal. So the Summit has been hit hard the last couple of years. So I'm going to take St. John's there. Let's go to the other side of the bracket. We start with Duke. I don't think Duke's going to have any issues. I know the big question is Cooper Flagg going to play? I wouldn't play him on Friday. You're not going to need him. I mean, you'll probably need him on Sunday to take down one of these two teams, but I would not waste my time. I know that's obviously not my decision, but Duke, he's probably got the best medical personnel in the country, so they will take good care of Cooper Flagg, and he'll be just fine. So moving on, Mississippi State, another team that kind of sneaks their way in that SEC schedule, but I'm going to take the Baylor Bears. My Big 12 bias shows up once again. I do think Baylor is better, but I don't think they'll last very long, as they come up with Duke here in a second, and their freshmen, I think, will show up and kind of show what he's made of for those NBA scouts. Or this next one, I've hesitated on several times. I know Arizona's in the Big 12, and I've talked about my Big 12 thoughts, but I've heard about Akron and how good Akron is. They've been talking. Not really impressed me a ton, other than the work of Caleb Love. I know they lost to Kansas at Kansas, and then they beat Kansas in the Big 12 tournament. But honestly, Kansas had already played, and I think Kansas was exhausted by the time they played Arizona, which they should not be exhausted in a tournament, because Kansas is like 13 guys deep. But I'm going to take an upset here, because I think Akron can make some noise in this tournament, and Arizona is also in years past been known to not perform well as they enter this tournament. So I'm going to take Akron to take down the Wildcats. On to BYU VCU, another one that I clicked one of these teams rather quickly the first time around, and the more analysis I see, the more hesitant I get. But I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt. Maybe I'm shaking from how badly BYU beat Kansas a few weeks ago in the Mormon Massacre, if anybody remembers. BYU has to shoot the lights out to beat anybody, and I think they can hopefully do that here. I know VCU has been in the tournament a lot. I know the Shaka Smart days in the past, but I'm going to take BYU here. Wisconsin and Montana. Wisconsin is just going to get this done. I think Wisconsin kind of burst onto the scene. I don't want to say burst onto the scene, but they played really well in the Big Ten tournament. And I think they have some guys that can show up and do their thing in the first round. St. Mary's and Vanderbilt. Again, Vanderbilt representing the 85 SEC teams that made this tournament. This is kind of a tricky one because St. Mary's has, again, been there, done that. St. Mary's and Gonzaga, of course, face each other in the WCC 45 times a year, and it's always back and forth, back and forth. I'm going to go ahead and take St. Mary's here. This game, again, this SEC pride could show up and do its thing, but I'm going to take St. Mary's in the 7-10. And rolling on, North Dakota take a stand here. I know Grant Nelson is a question mark to play in the tournament. I know he went down the SEC tournament, but I don't think they'll need a whole lot of help from Grant Nelson to take down Robert Morris. And then we go on to the final bracket. We have Houston, who just needs to stay healthy. Again, I love cheering on Houston in the dance because they're a Big 12 team, and I love Kelvin Sampson. They've had a few transfers from Kansas. Quentin Grimes a couple of years ago, and last year I had them winning the national title, and one of their guys goes down early in the Sweet 16, I believe, and it just dismantled everything they had going for them. So I really hope they can get healthy and stay healthy and see how far they can take this thing. Moving on, again, another SEC team in Georgia, but Gonzaga just has so many guys that can just do this. You got Mark Few. I'm taking the Zags, and that is a scary matchup for the Houston Cougars to see in the second round. You don't want to see Gonzaga in the first two rounds of the tournament ever, regardless of what number is next to their name. Another crazy matchup. Clemson, McNeese. Clemson in a down year in the ACC, but we all know Clemson can take down Duke if they play well enough. We got McNeese. This is a nightmare of a draw for McNeese. I was looking forward to taking McNeese to win a few games in this tournament just based on what I've seen in the last couple of weeks, things I've seen on Twitter, everything. But drawing a team like Clemson, who of course went to the Elite Eight last year, tough draw for McNeese. I'm going to take Clemson to take down McNeese. And here we go. Let's bet against the Big Ten once again. Purdue, God knows what Purdue is going to show up with here. I believe High Point's got a few bigs, and Purdue just hasn't been able to match up in the bigs department this year with the absence and departure of Edey from last year. I'm going to take High Point to take down Purdue and move on to the next round. Illinois, Texas, and Xavier. Another tricky one. I've listened to several podcasts in the last 2 days since the brackets have been revealed. I would love to see Texas maybe represent how tough the SEC has been. Xavier also kind of making some noise in the Big East. And Illinois, another tricky Big Ten team. What Illinois team are we going to get? Let's go ahead and fade the Big Ten again. I'm going to take either Texas or Xavier. I'd love to say Texas, but if Xavier wins this thing, takes down Texas in the first four, we'll take Xavier too. So I apologize to my dad who claims to be a Troy fan, but I do not think they'll have enough to take down Kentucky with all the skill and talent Kentucky has. Another tricky one here. I don't know enough about either of these teams other than UCLA had some troubles in different parts of their season and just kind of some of the press conferences I was seeing their coach discuss. I am going to take UCLA just from playing in the Big Ten. This game could go either way. I would not argue. I would not step down from anybody taking Utah State, but this is another tricky, very intriguing matchup to see style versus style. And I got Tennessee is just going to be way too much for Wofford, and we move on to the next round. Again, tough pull for the Louisville Cardinals. Have a great year. They've been down the last couple of years, and then you get rolled out with an 8 seed, have to play Creighton, and then you get Auburn. The big thing they have going for them here is I believe this regional is in Kentucky. So sad day for Auburn. You got to deal with all these Louisville fans showing up, but I do think that Janai Broom and Auburn will be too much for Louisville. So Auburn takes them down. You get the 12-13 matchup, people. What else could you ask for? I'm going to take UC San Diego to have this continued miracle run, first year of eligibility for the tournament as they move up to D1, and they continue to become America's Cinderella story. Let's move on to Ole Miss and Iowa State, SEC versus a pretty solid Big 12 team. I am hoping that Iowa State can continue to represent the Big 12. I'm going to take the Cyclones to move on past Ole Miss. And Marquette, Michigan State got some Shaka Smart versus Tom Izzo. And I'm going to keep shining with Tom Izzo. Just Michigan State's going to be too much for Marquette. Cam Jones can only handle too much, and Sparty moves on. Let's go down to the next region. We got Florida, and here's your 1 seed, Florida, and here come the Yukon Huskies that can pose any problems to just about anybody you want. Like I said in the first round, Florida is just peaking at the exact time they want to peak. I'm going to take Florida to move on to the Sweet 16. My next one, tricky one here. We could absolutely fade the Big Ten, or we could continue with this magical run for Colorado State. Either way, I don't think either of them is going to fare well against the Florida Gators. I'm going to take Maryland, just kind of finding their way through this tournament as they've kind of had a come out of the woodwork season in the Big Ten. I did not expect to see them relevant a few weeks ago. Like I said, I don't watch a ton of college basketball until mid-February-ish, and it's been good to see Maryland back on the scene. Coming down to Drake, Texas Tech. Holy cow, we got some great matchups in this region, even in the round of 32. This tournament, even during Selection Sunday, they were halfway through this bracket, and I went, holy cow, there's some serious talent and some seriously great matchups on the horizon. Drake and Texas Tech. I think Texas Tech, again, might be my Big 12 bias. I think Texas Tech and Toppin are just a little too much for the Drake Bulldogs. This game could go either way. I would not fade Drake in any way, shape, or form, but I think Texas Tech also being in the conversation for Final Four team all year long, Texas Tech finds a way to get it done. And here goes my Jayhawks departure. I don't even know if I'd want to watch this St. John's defense just tear apart Kansas. Kansas is so inconsistent offensively. Defensively, they're great for 5 minutes, and then they don't guard a three-point shooter for the next 10 minutes. This game could be ugly, to be completely honest with you. So St. John's, again, America's darling this year. Rick Pitino returns to the top, and St. John's moves on. So let's go back up to the top. We got Duke playing Baylor. I think Baylor barely sneaks by Mississippi State, and Duke is just a lot for Baylor. Hopefully Baylor's freshman phenom gets some spotlight and glory before Baylor's departure in the second round. We go on to Oregon and Akron. Here's another tricky one again. I've heard a lot of good things about Oregon in the last 48 hours, and after seeing them play for maybe like 10 minutes all season. I know Akron is another tough outing, and I'm going to take the Akron Zips. I hate to go against Oregon and Dana Altman, but here is the time. I'd also rather get some double-digit seeds here and there just so we don't have chalk everywhere, but I'm going to take Akron. I'm very hesitant on that pick, but something tells me in a couple weeks it won't be the worst idea I've ever had. So moving on to BYU, Wisconsin. Oof. Again, BYU has to shoot the lights out to win this game. Wisconsin, again, just had a great showing in the Big Ten tournament. I'm going to take BYU. I'm going to stay away from just these 1, 2, 3, 4 seeds moving on every round. I'm going to stick with the Big 12, and maybe the Mormons can show up and show out. This game, again, could go either way. Wisconsin's stud guard has to do his thing. I'm going to take BYU. This game could be interesting. Again, BYU took down Iowa State in the Big 12 tournament, which was amazing. And then if you look at the stats, BYU was just raining three-pointers left and right, and they still only won by like 4. So be careful with BYU. I am going to take BYU to make its way to the Elite Eight. So let's go down to St. Mary's, Alabama. Again, we'll see if Grant Nelson is healthy. I'm sure he'll play. I don't see why he wouldn't unless this injury is worse than I have heard. I'm going to take Bama to move on to the next round. And let's go down again. Goodness, you get Houston. Here's your 1 seed. By the way, you get Gonzaga in the round of 32. Ouch. Rough stuff. So I'm going to take Houston because I think Houston is just a very well-rounded team. Whatever the spread is in this, I could definitely see Gonzaga covering it, but Houston is my Big 12 champion this year, and they continue to move on. I think Clemson here takes advantage of the 13 seed taking down the 4 seed for them. I think Clemson, who, as we know, made a pretty solid run last year. They are back. They used their experience from last year. They're, again, a solid team. They're one of Duke's only losses in the ACC. I know it was at Clemson, but still, Clemson is a scary 5 seed to have to see in your bracket. Oof. Moving on, we get Texas or Xavier against Kentucky. Kentucky, of course, always known to do well in this tournament, other than, of course, the early exits. We got Coach Pope. Let's take Kentucky here. Again, I don't know who I'm getting between Texas and Xavier, but their run stops in the round of 32. And we come down to UCLA, Tennessee. I'm just going to take Tennessee here. I think their defense and just even some of the things I've seen against Tennessee, they have to shoot the lights out, and if they do, the game is over. And if they struggle to shoot, then their day is over. So I'm going to take Tennessee to move on to the next round. Let's go up. We got the Sweet 16. Here is unfortunately where UC San Diego's run comes to an end. I do think Auburn is the most vulnerable 1 seed in this entire bracket, which of course is ironic since they're the number 1 overall. I just think Duke has been solid all year. Florida is peaking at the perfect time. They're showing how balanced they are during the month of March. And Houston, I just love because they basically run the Big 12 now. But I am going to take Auburn to take down UC San Diego. This game could be a lot more interesting than people think. These are the types of games of why we love March, because who knows what UC San Diego could figure out on how to take down Auburn. Moving on to Iowa State and Michigan State, I think this is when Iowa State's major injury problems come into effect. I think Michigan State finds a way to take down Iowa State in a pretty solid match. Iowa State and Michigan State in the Sweet 16. Sign me up. Let's go down to Florida and Maryland. I think Florida is way too much for Maryland in this game. I think Maryland having a Memphis team from a not great American conference, and Colorado State, I think they just run into a buzzsaw of Florida. And coming down here, I would love to take Texas Tech in this game. I'm very curious how this game would go because Texas Tech has all year been a potential Final Four team. Obviously, St. John's has as well. But St. John's just suffocates you. They're so good on both ends of the floor. Again, Patino has been there, done that. So I'm going to take St. John's to move on to the Elite Eight. And I mean, look at these Elite Eight matchups. I know this is definitely not how this is actually going to go, because let's be real, we're not going to get, I doubt we're going to get 1, 2 seeds flying around everywhere in the Elite Eight. Let's move on to Duke and Akron. I don't know a whole lot about Akron other than what some analysts have been saying, that they're a scary team to meet in this tournament. I think Cooper Flagg continues to shine, and he moves on with the Duke Blue Devils into the Elite Eight. And then here comes BYU. This game could be shooting the lights out. Whatever team doesn't shoot as well the other, and which sounds obvious, but these two teams, this total could be 180 points based on their 3-point shooters. I'm going to take Alabama, just some SEC strength, and I think BYU just kind of slows down, and they're just not able to handle the power and the speed of Alabama. Alabama charges into the Elite Eight. Coming down here, here's one of the toughest decisions of the whole bracket. While I would love to take St. John's over Florida, this is a tough one. I kind of want to take St. John's just so I don't have 1 seeds flying all over the place. But let's see what we got here. Oh, sorry. Wrong bracket. I got so excited. I got so excited to talk about St. John's that I backtracked. All right, moving on to Houston, Clemson. I mean, Houston has wanted to be here for years, and this is kind of where their injuries have hurt them in the past. Clemson was here last year. Does that help Clemson enough to take down Houston? I don't think so. I think Houston continues their fantastic run that they have been waiting for the last couple of years. I believe they take on Tennessee. I think Kentucky didn't look spectacular in the SEC tournament, and I think Tennessee gets the best of them. I would have to look at all their head-to-head matchups this year for analytics and statistics, but this is more of just a quick analysis, and let's keep the ball rolling. Going on to the Elite Eight, let's go to our regional final games. Auburn and Michigan State. I know I mentioned I think Auburn is the most vulnerable. I know people have been talking about how they have lost like 3 of their last 4. I don't think that matters a whole lot because any good team and any good coach knows that this tournament is a completely new season. No one cares what you did in the last couple of weeks, other than just when you're peaking at the right time. I'm going to take Tom Izzo and the Michigan State Spartans to take down Auburn. I think Izzo and Sparty find the weaknesses of Auburn. They control Janai Broom and they make their way. Izzo makes his way back to the Final Four since the first time since I got to attend the Final Four in Minneapolis in 2019. Let's go on down. Here we go. We got to get back to this game as I backtracked and got super excited about Pitino. Florida and St. John's. Tough one. Florida, as we know, is, I think I've said it 15 times now, just peaking right when they want to. Absolute solid team. Eight teams in the country. I saw some posts that the semi. I don't want chalk flying left and right. I'm going to take Rick Pitino and the St. John's Red Storm to make their way to the Final Four to set up a Tom Izzo versus Rick Pitino. Here, I'm a born and raised Duke hater, although I love watching Cooper Flagg play. I have plenty of friends who are massive Duke fans. I don't know what Alabama's health is going to look like at this point, and Alabama has looked spectacular, and then they'll just look mediocre the next day. I just think Duke is so balanced in every direction that I think Duke is just too much for the Crimson Tide to handle, and Duke makes their way back to another Final Four. Coming down to, I believe, our Midwest region. Yep. We got Houston and Tennessee. We got 1-2 seeds left and right, people, which I never love to see. I like to be a little different. I know I have plenty of double-digit seeds left and right. But even as some podcasts and analysts I've listened to, the 1-2 seeds in this bracket are just so good. They've been good. It hasn't just been the last week. All season long, all these 1 seeds, all these 2 seeds have just showed why they should be on the 1 and 2 line. And that's why it hasn't changed a ton in the last 2 months, because they've been consistent and other teams have not been very consistent. And that's why they've dropped to the 5, 6, 7 lines and such. So anyways, I'm going to take Houston. I think this is a game where Houston controls the pace. Houston slows down Tennessee's shooters. And I say that because Houston's defense has been fantastic. They went into Allen Fieldhouse and took down the Jayhawks this year. I believe it was a game that Kansas definitely shouldn't have lost, which would have been a few months ago. And going into Allen Fieldhouse and beating Kansas is not an easy task, even though it's becoming, unfortunately, more common than it has in the past. So we move on to the Final Four. We've got Michigan State and St. John's. My first bracket I filled out, I had Florida over St. John's until I just said, you know what? We need a little bit of differentiated other than just 3 1 seeds and a 2 seed. So we got Izzo and Rick Pitino with a spot in the national championship game on the line. This game could be absolutely incredible. I'm going to take St. John's and Rick Pitino, America's darling this year. You know, Izzo is always ready for this game, but I also have flashbacks to when I saw Michigan State, the Cassius Winston year, play in Minneapolis for the Final Four, and their Final Four game, they shot horribly. So again, just because you have Tom Izzo coaching your team doesn't guarantee you a spot anywhere. Let's move on over here. I know I mentioned I am born and raised Duke hater. It really has nothing to do with being born and raised a Duke hater. Maybe it's just my Big 12 bias, but I'm going to take Houston. Last year I had Houston and Iowa State in the national title game. Well, Iowa State kind of ran into their own troubles. Houston had injury problems that tore them down way earlier than they wanted to. So while I do not have Iowa State in the title game this year because of their injury problems, and I know Houston has their own right now, I think this is the year Kelvin Sampson finally finds a way to get to the Final Four and get it done. The Houston Cougars cut down the nets in San Antonio. How many total points will be scored? Oof, we got two really good defenses, but I do think they both find a way to score some points. A lot of these points come down to trading layups towards the end of the game and some free throws to find a way to win. The Houston Cougars, so I'll go 152 as my total. The Houston Cougars cut down the nets in San Antonio, and the Houston Cougars and Kelvin Sampson are national champions for 2025.